You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to Dave and Meg, the show. Show number 486. 618 400. 14 more shows to 500 shows. That's crazy. If you have the time, please go ahead and donate to the station, or subscribe, or purchase some of the merch. Alright? Or just generally come into the chat room and have a chat. There's like 40 chatters inside the chat room. It's a great discourse. It always is. Thank you so much. And the station is one of the last few remaining bastions of actual free speech, where you can say pretty much anything you like, as long as you adhere to the radio code. So no swearing, foul language, etc., etc. That's only, but that's fair enough. That's fair enough. And to be honest with you, and this is sort of sidestepping a little bit, but I always enjoyed comedy that didn't have too much swearing in it. Of course, I laugh. I laugh at the old F-bomb or whatever. But I look at Jerry Seinfeld, for example. He didn't swear ever, not once in his stand-up, ever, not once that I've ever seen him swear. And I really enjoyed that. But yeah, so look, if you have the time and the patience, please donate. Make sure the station stays up and running. We've been here 10 years, which is a long time, and we still haven't run out of stuff to talk about, which is even more astounding. But this brings us to the second hour, which will talk about the parasitic fiat currency and fractional reserve system that is, pretty much in place everywhere in the world. Now, it really isn't right, Dave, to say fractional anymore.
No, because why? Because you're not required in not all countries, of course, but in a lot of the Western world, there is no longer a requirement to have any supporting currency before you lend any amount to anyone. Yeah,
correct. So you no longer have to have anything in reserve, no matter how small the fraction. There's no longer a fraction. Division by zero is no longer allowed. So it's sort of a bit of a misnomer. It's just called the parasitic banking system. Done. And that's where we are. That's what we're going to talk about. We've spent a few weeks trying to explain what the system actually looks like. It's really, to be honest with you, it's really simple. And people try to make it hard to understand by using terms and special economic jargon. But it is really, really, really simple. Just as a recap, because it is the last show of the cycle, and we're going to finish early as well, so we're going to have a bit of a discussion afterwards. Ultimately, the banking system came about, by people just having strong boxes, usually jewelers. You leave your stuff there, and the jewelers over time thought, hey, I got all this stuff here, and the people haven't come back to get it. Why don't I just use my collateral, which is really what it is, to lend out people money? I become an institution that way, and so they did. They, wrote these letters, promising, to honor the debt that would be incurred if the paper was presented to them, right? So they had to have enough on hand if anybody ever came to ask for their gold back, and off they went, right? And then they decided, oh, you know what? Why don't I lend out a lot more? Because they realized, there's a lot of people don't come back for this stuff in a long, long time, right? So why don't I just lend out a lot more than I actually have? Because nobody ever comes to call on it. They're happy that it sits here and that does whatever it does. So that's how the fractional reserve lending system was born. And then the fiat currency came along. Now, what does fiat currency mean? Fiat currency means because essentially it means because we said so.
Yeah, and the value of the actual money is worthless. So if we had gold coins right now, imagine how small a gold coin would have to be 5 cents if it was made of gold.
Well, my wallet would be really easy to carry.
just think, but if an ounce is what, $1,500? So
that's about right.
Yeah, so to have a 5 cents worth of gold it'd be just dust particles. Yeah. So it would become ridiculous. But in the time when you had a $1,500 coin with an ounce of gold, which is silly, the gold itself had value. At the moment, the coins and the notes have zero value on their own. You can't melt them down and sell them anywhere.
Correct. Right. And that's where we are. So we're living in a system that is actually completely illusionary. It's a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens now these days? The government says, "I need money." Okay. So what the government says then to its treasurer or finance minister, whoever is the entity in charge there, I need money. And the finance person goes, "Okay," and off they go, and they write or print or otherwise produce something that's called bonds. They're called government bonds, and that bond says, "I owe you." The bond is an IOU. They take that IOU, the bond, to the central bank, the federal bank, whatever it might be. Always understanding, though, everybody, that these federal or central banks are not part of the governmental structure. They're usually privately owned entities. So they go there and they go, "Oh, hey, Mr. Banker, Mr. Privately owned banker, here's a bond for $10 billion. I need you to issue my currency, please." And there are laws in various countries that have given the central or the federal reserves that right to do that. And off they go. Now, you will ask, where does this money come from, Mackie? You've just told me I no longer have to have gold in reserve for it.
Woohoo!
It's not tied to anything. And the answer is, everybody, it comes from nowhere. Hang on, this is the sound of its creation. It's out of thin air. That's a special sound effect there.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of it. That's how it actually works. Now, the funny thing is this, and I know I've said it before, and I'll say it again because it's such a hard concept to wrap your mind around. If all the debt in the world was ever paid back, there would be no money in circulation. The money that you hold in your wallets, in your hand, whatever, physically that is, or even in your bank account, that's debt. They're promissory notes for debt, but they're not listed against anything. So there's nothing that sits at the other end of this debt that is securing it. There's no gold, no diamonds, no units of work or whatever, or even seashells. There's just nothing there. And as soon as the debt is all paid off, like let's say every country in the world pays off its national debt, right? And then everybody pays off their debt. There would be no money in circulation because the debt is now gone. And all our money is debt. It's a promissory note to make good on the debt that we owe. Which, of course, nobody ever can. There's just too much of it now, right? And nobody can ever get out of the debt spiral because it's designed that way. Becky, that's crazy. No, that's the system, everybody. The money you're holding in your hand is a debt note. It is not representing value, but the opposite of value. Because it was made out of nothing. It has no any kind of intrinsic value in the real world. It is not tied to anything that has any value. The only thing that it is tied to is the government's promise to honor the debt they say they incurred when the federal or central banks or whatever issued the currency. So these bonds are being held. And the funny thing is this, do you know who holds most of the American or the US dollar bonds in the world today?
Germany?
China. If China really wanted to hurt the United States, really hurt them, they would just sell all the bonds they have. That would be it. Well, let's close up. Last one out, please. Turn off the light. And that'd be it for America.
You don't forget to turn the lights off on your way out.
That's right. Are you going to Mexico? Yeah, to make sure you turn off the lights. So this is, in essence, how it actually works. I know we spent weeks and weeks discussing it because there's a lot of history in it, and it took a lot of time to establish it. But ultimately, that's what it is. That's where we are. And Dave, and now we're coming to and this is an abridged article that we found. It's called Money Creation, and it's an economist's view. And Dave is going to share it with you on what's this page?
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay. So yeah. So bear in mind though, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is how our economy actually works.
It's rather reminiscent of a South Park episode, Mickey, to do with money creation and economist view. The standard story about how banks create money and how reserves work is the money multiplier model. Money creation starts with the government injecting fiat money, that's not the car model or the car brand, but fiat money, this is pretend money, it's just an agreed value of money, into the economy. Say by giving a welfare recipient $100 in cash. That recipient then deposits the cash in a bank, which hangs on to a government-mandated fraction of it, the reserve requirement, say 10% maybe, or $10 for maths' sake, and lends out the rest to a borrower. The borrower then deposits $90 in another bank, which does the same thing, hangs on to 10% of that $90 or $9 and lends out the other $81 to another borrower. The process repeats ad infinitum, and in the end a total of $1,000 is brought to existence. The original $100 in cash plus $900 in credit money created by the private banking sector, matched of course by $900 in debt. The alleged system, known as fractional reserve banking, is seen as fraud by the Austrian economists and by many in the public. The inflationists, because Bernanke has hit the printing presses, dramatically increasing base money, and therefore money in circulation will soon explode, leading to hyperinflation. To neoclassical economists, it's just the way banking works. Bank lending is controlled by the Fed because even if banks hold no reserves, Fed control over the currency means that the private banks must do what the Fed wants. And to anyone who's done empirical research, it's a myth. Hang on, I'm carrying on like Joe Biden. It's a myth.
Whisper, walk quietly.
Yes. The most recent $1.8 billion is what he said. The most recent proof of this is an excellent discussion paper from the Federal Reserve economist Carpenter and Demiralp, entitled, that's an unfortunate name, Danny. I'm sorry, Demiralp, but yeah, don't like it. Entitled Money Reserves and the Transmission of Monetary Policy. Does the money multiplier exist? The first clue that it doesn't exist is given by their abstract, which notes that before the financial crisis, reserve balances were roughly 20 billion. Okay, if the textbook model were correct, the total stock of money in the US would be 200 billion versus the multi-trillion-dollar level of even a narrow definition of the money stock. As the authors note, this makes a mockery of the textbook money multiplier model. M2 averaged about 7.25 trillion in 2007. Bank loans for 2007 were about 6.25 trillion. If we consider the fact that reserve balances held at the Federal Reserve were about 15 billion and required reserves were about 43 billion, the tight link drawn in the textbook transmission mechanism from reserves to money and bank lending seems all the more tenuous. If the money multiplier model doesn't really describe how money is created and how reserve figure in this, what does? The short answer is endogenous money. Banking lending creates deposits, so the decisions of banks to provide loans determine the level of money, and reserves are largely irrelevant.
Correct. And that's where we are today. In fact, completely irrelevant. There's no reserves, in Australia at least, are no longer required. And in the United States, those reserves, I think, either not required or very, very, very low.
Yeah, they were made into law, those that there weren't any reserves required. This isn't just something they happened across.
No.
There were conversations where we've got to get rid of the fractional reserve lending.
Yeah.
We just want to learn. We just want to do business, Maggie.
Well, see what it does. It allows governments to spend as much money as they want.
And you're restricting us from lending money to people.
Yeah.
That's restricting our profit.
Yeah. And it
Sorry.
moves, but you're right. Though. It moves enormous wealth into the pockets of the few. It does. It just does.
Isn't it the only direction wealth should go? If I was a banker, of course, right?
I think you're okay, Dave.
Anything else is confusing to me.
You consider the big boys table now.
I'm so not.
So
the treadmill's going faster, I'll tell you that, and I don't seem to be getting anywhere. That's all right.
Yeah, that's the truth. Just don't drive your car anywhere for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's right.
But
I love the banks.
We all love the banks. But this is the truth, and this is from the Business Spectator. It's from an article that was written in 2012, and you can go ahead and look at it yourself. www.businessspectator.com.au. Myth of the money, or myth money multiplier, right? It's the myth of the money, but there isn't one. There's no. It's a fantasy. It's a complete house of cards. In fact, the house of cards is built with cards made from sugar in the rain. That's where we are. Okay.
My sugar pile.
Yeah, I know, right? And there's nothing that's holding it up except our belief that it's real. You talk about a religion, this money system, our economy, that's our religion. That's because there's nothing but belief keeping it in place.
It's the only thing keeping it in place.
The only thing. Now, interesting article here as well by Matthias Chang, Global Research, November 1, 2013. And the entire fiat money system is bankrupt. Demise of the global US fiat dollar reserve currency. Demise of the global US fiat dollar reserve currency. Major issues or trends do not change on a daily or even monthly basis. A trend may take a few years to run its course, and unless there's a major factor that may affect the trend, there's hardly any need to comment any further on the trend or outcomes. The events unraveling post-Bernanke's decision not to taper QE is most significant because it confirms our analysis that the banking crisis has not been resolved in any significant way after 5 years of money printing and massive asset inflation. The fiat money system has but one outcome: total collapse. It will also mean the demise of the global US dollar reserve currency. There are no solutions at hand.
I just want everyone to know that QE is quantitative easing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, it is. That's correct. And this is from the Global Research, www.globalresearch.ca. Okay, that's you can look it up yourself. Now, going on here, Bernanke is totally discredited, and his continued tenure as chair of the Fed, of course he's no longer there, would only accelerate the realization that the Fed and all the central banks have failed. And by Fed, they're referring to the Federal Reserve in the States. Hence, the need to change the leadership of the Fed. But the same policies would be followed with some cosmetic changes to hoodwink the ignorant masses. That's all of us, by the way. We are the ignorant masses. Well, you're not anymore, because you know how it works now. It is analogous to the transition from the second Bush presidency to that of Obama, and all the theatrics of change, propaganda. In fact, Obama is Bush 2 on steroids, or was back then, which is true. He actually started more wars than Bush 2, believe it or not. Yellen will be Bernanke on steroids. Again, this was written in 2013.
Yeah,
we've got the value or the advantage of hindsight. Why are we so certain of this outcome at future fast forward? Our reasons are as follows. Prior to the global financial tsunami of 2008, I had written, this is Martin Chang, the author of the article, several articles exposing the global too big to fail TBTF banks as financial rapists and predators, and they would cause untold havoc to the financial system. Not Chinese side outwards. This is Martin Chang from Global Research.
It's Matthias Chang.
Matthias, sorry. Post the crisis, he had also warned that these global TBTF banks are insolvent, and the toxic assets on their balance sheets would exceed $20 trillion at the minimum. The entire fiat money system is bankrupt. Printing toilet paper money by the trillions does not make the system solvent. It is a clear admission that the system is totally broken. The banking Humpty Dumpty has fallen from the wall and shattered into 1,000 pieces. I love that. The confirmation for this is the fact that all central banks led by the Fed have only one aim: to create massive asset inflation. How can the stock market of a bankrupt nation be at an all-time high? The Fed and central banks the world over are not interested in resolving the unemployment problem because record unemployment would not collapse the fiat money system. It may trigger massive social unrest, but that can be put down by a militarized police force. Hang on, we're seeing that, aren't we? Supported by a battle-hardened military, as is happening in the US. In the circumstances, we need to ask the US trillion-dollar question: why are all the central banks focusing on asset inflation via creation of money out of thin air? And the answer is this: the fiat money system is the economy, stupid. Yes, it is. Like I said, if we ever paid off the debt, there'd be no money. The fiat money system is the economy. It used to be that the petrodollar was the linchpin of the global economy. However, when the derivatives market took off and became a $800 trillion global casino, the US toilet paper became the currency in global financial trading and speculation. All the too big to fail banks were leveraged to their eyeballs, and the collaterals were hypothecated and rehypothecated so many times over it became an inverted pyramid joke. The collaterals were bundled up into CDOs, etc., rated AAA. These are like the financial instruments that people were talking about when the collapse happened. They were rated AAA by corrupt rating agencies and traded. Now, we actually looked at this. This is away from the text now. These rating agencies were paid by the institutions they were rating. It's like having the Olympic medalists that win the gold medals. The Olympic gold medalists are the ones that are paying the people handing out the gold medals. That's how that is. It was that who should get the gold medal? Oh, Bob, he paid me. That's good. It's amazing. And now we don't need to repeat this old story, right? The point we are making here in this article is not that only are the collaterals junks, but they are supporting a mountain of debts in the trillions. Therefore, when collaterals are impaired, the too big to fail banks are in a hole from which they cannot get out, and they couldn't. That's why so much, like hundreds of billions were pumped into the banks. Remember that in the financial crisis? Hundreds of billions were pumped in there. The Fed and other central banks have no choice but to bail out the too big to fail banks if a systemic failure is to be avoided. If all the junk collaterals were to be offloaded at once in the full glare of public scrutiny, there would be a run on the banks, on all the banks. So what was required was a stealth rescue effort. The too big to fail banks were allowed to unload the junk collaterals bit by bit by the various schemes of the Fed, culminating in the US $85 billion a month purchases of treasury bonds and mortgages by the Fed. Additionally, newly minted collaterals were used to replace the junks so as to clean up the balance sheets of the TBTF banks, too big to fail. He has stated earlier, the author, that the minimum amount of toxic assets needed to be mopped up is about $20 trillion US. After 5 years, the Fed has just scratched the surface. It is debatable how many US trillion dollars the Fed has actually pumped into the system, directly and indirectly. How much and how long more can the Fed continue to pump US dollar toilet paper into the system without creating a massive loss of confidence in the dollar? When the balance sheet of the Fed reaches $7 trillion, or maybe $10 trillion, or maybe $100 trillion, it's anyone's guess, Dave.
Isn't it? For sure. I'm going to agree. For sure. For sure. There will be a point when another US 100 billion is created on top of the stash of US toilet paper dollars, which will tip the scale and collapse the entire system. It is a catch-22 for the Fed. If it stops creating money on one hand, out of thin air, the fiat money system would collapse immediately. If it continues with more money creation, it merely postpones the inevitable and more devastating end game. This comes from The Economist. This is the price we all have to pay for allowing the fiat money system to hold sway for so long. As we've highlighted in the other 7 shows, the world was conned into accepting the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of banking and finance. The US Global Reserve Currency Ponzi scheme, says Matthias Chung. This scheme was created on a sandcastle of debt, specifically US Treasury bonds. The world does not need a global reserve currency. Global trade can be conducted in any currency in accordance to the needs and resources of a country. Why should there be a special privilege given to only one country to have its currency as the sole reserve currency for purposes of trade? It makes no sense, as it is the result of US imperialist policies under the pretext of the Cold War. The con was based on propaganda that the US dollar should be the preferred currency and the US Treasury bond is the safest asset to have in the event of an outbreak of war between Western imperialist camp and the Soviet bloc. We were told this arrangement was necessary if we were to enjoy the protection of the mighty US superpower. Now, what a hit piece this is. Yet, when the Soviet bloc collapsed, no one questioned the need to perpetuate the system. Another spin was propagated. The US was the linchpin in the new era of globalization, as the US market was the biggest consumer and export market. Everyone was caught in this web of deceit and debt and responsibility of losses. The US market was a market built on a mountain of debt. Adding insult to injury, the US consumers paid for the goods produced by millions, breaking their backs with US dollar toilet paper money. Some so-called currency experts have asserted that no other currency can replace the US dollar toilet paper as the global reserve currency because no other country has a bond market like the US bond market, dominated by the US Treasury bonds. Not bombs, that's a Freudian slip. What an idiotic statement. If a country is not in debt, there is no need for any bonds to be issued. A bond is an IOU, as my esteemed colleague Meki has suggested on many a time. A bond is a mere paper pledge to repay a debt. And anyone who says and continues to perpetuate the myth that a US debt is a better debt and is more secure is ignorant and misinformed. Why would anyone want to work and produce goods which is sold and paid in US dollars, toilet paper, and then use the surplus US dollars toilet paper to lend to the US government, who repays the debt by merely printing more, guess what, US dollar toilet paper? So, do you still think the world needs US dollar toilet paper money as a reserve currency? I think there's a message in that for all of us. You did right.
I think there is, Dave. I think there's. But look, this is interesting, right? Again, this is not our own research, but it coincides with a lot of the research that we had undertaken, and it's a nice summary again of what it all means. And the bond is really just that. It's an IOU, a treasury bond. I don't care if anybody. See, this is so again a piece of paper. Treasury goes, oh look, I need $1 trillion. They print up this. They write up the bond. Legal document and all that, right? Of course, hand it to the bankers and say, "Here's $1 trillion that we will pay you if you now print us $1 trillion of US currency." There's a very important step here that is missed, though, and this is a logical chasm. It's a chasm. It's not a little fissure. It's a chasm. Think of the Grand Canyon. No, actually, no, don't think of the Grand Canyon. Look at Mars. You see that little crater on the side of it? Mm-hmm. Think of it that way. Where does the Federal Reserve or any money issuing institution in any country, which is usually privately owned, where do they get the power to issue that currency? Well, they got it through law, right? It was given to them by the governments, by the individual nation states. But based on what? Based on what? Why are they allowed to issue currency? And the government goes to them head in hand. Government goes head in hand with the bonds, saying, "Oh, please, Mr. Federal Reserve, Mr. Central Bank, can you please print me some currency?" And off they go. And they're now holding these trillions and trillions, not just dollars, but shekels and pounds and euros and whatever it is, in debt over every country in the world. But where does this money come from? Right? This is the question you have to ask yourself. Yes, the government has printed a bond, taken that paper to the central bank, to the Federal Reserve, and says, "Please print me this money." And they do. But why? Why does the bond mean that the government now owes these bankers $1 trillion? Why does it mean that? And why doesn't the government issue its own currency? Why do we need to live in a debt society? There's no good answer to that question, except, of course, that's the way it is. And people have worked very hard to make it this way. Very hard, tirelessly, doing whatever needed to be done to get this through. Doing whatever needed to be done to get us to where we are today. Because we are now living in their fantasy world. Think about this. I've been given the authority to create money out of thin air. Not only that, the government says it owes me that money that I've created out of thin air. So I'm giving it to the government. I printed it all up here. This look how beautifully I printed it. And seals and three-dimensional images and all that, and watermarks, can't be forged, whatever. But I made it. It came out of my printing press. There's nothing underlying it. There's no value that I'm transmitting through this money. There's nothing backing it up, except for the government saying, "Oh yeah, look, I owe you this money now." It's actually insane. If you really think it through and say it out loud, it is complete insanity. There's nothing sane or logical about the entire process, except, of course, for the people that are in it. They go, "This is brilliant. I'm like pig in mud. Look at me. It's just brilliant. I'm at the feeding trough, and it just keeps getting filled up. I'm full. I can't eat anymore, please." Oh, yeah. There you go. That's where we are. And it's really, and I think nobody, and I forgot the last week, but nobody gave us this beautiful quote, right? Either you're so in need of the favors of the system, or you're so taking advantage of the system that the only people that could speak up don't, because they're beholden to the system, essentially. They're beholden, except for Dave and I. We're not beholden. But yet, hey, we're open to corruption. We're open to bribery. Go ahead. No, but it's really, it is upsetting in many ways. It insults my intelligence when I think about it, and it insults my intelligence when I realize that nobody knows that this is actually happening. Nobody understands the system. Not the bankers. Like I'm talking about, when I say bankers, I'm talking people working in the bank, right? Tellers and even senior managers. I mean, I'm sure the senior people don't understand it. They fully understand what's going on, but for the most part, nobody really understands what is going on here. Nobody has any idea that this is how the system works, because we grew up in the system, and there's no. Did you notice that nobody's actually reporting on any of this? Nobody's investigating any of this. Nobody's launching any, senatorial inquiries or, what's it called, Commonwealth, committee, the board of inquiries, whatever. So nobody's launching any royal commission. Nobody's launching any of that. Nobody. In fact, the investigations into the banking system, even when they came up with some recommendations, they weren't even followed, right? Recently, and the banks have no interest at all in listening to the government, because they don't care. They have no interest at all in what the government says or does, right? Because they have all the power they need. And it's only because we allow this to happen. Whoa, what does that mean, Mackie? What it means is that we give power to the currency they issue because we think it's real. We give this currency power. We give these people power by accepting that that currency is valuable. That's why there's such a need for them to, stop any kind of black market activities, any cash in hand, or forget cash in hand, but bartering societies, people doing work for each other, for favors, etc. If people actually did that kind of thing and got off the grid and didn't use cash and all that, but produce and or their skills, the whole system would collapse. Now, is it realistic to go into that direction? No, it is not. And the reason it is not, because a lot of us can't live that way. We can't support ourselves that way. Okay. Again, a deliberate activity to get us where we are, to specialize the workforce to a degree that it now depends on the system. Right? We are now depending on the system for our continued welfare. Will the system ever collapse? Probably, but it will be catastrophic. And when it does, what will come in its place? I don't know. But there's no peaceful way to change it. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. So I'm kind of under the impression that the Great Reset will kind of turn it all to be a wonderful place with unicorns and sunshine and lollipops. Because if once everybody is on digital currency, the currency itself doesn't matter.
Beautiful segue. Because that takes us to the final component. Because we now have entered into an era where digital currency is an absolute reality. For a long time, it wasn't. But I don't know if many of you remember. Do you remember FPOS machines coming in and ATMs and all that?
The tellers disappear out of the banks? Absolutely.
Yeah. And now you can do online banking. You don't even have to. You don't have to hold your money physically. You can do all your purchases without ever holding any physical money ever.
It's a dream come true.
Oh, it's awesome. Alibaba's treasure cave. It's Alibaba. They have found Alibaba's treasure cave, and now they're in there. They've got a mini fridge, and they're not leaving. That's where.
That's right. They've moved in.
But there is a problem. There's a problem. Now, what we have are now, and this is something that I didn't think they saw coming. I'll be honest with you. I don't think they saw it coming. But cryptocurrencies are really going to or put a spanner in the works for the digital fiat currencies that everybody envisioned. Everybody wanted to move away from cash, make cash illegal, etc., etc. And we all have to move to digital currency, etc., etc. And that was seen as a good idea by you know who. But then crypto happened, and Bitcoin specifically, and not just crypto and Bitcoin, but what it's built on, which is blockchain, the technology called blockchain, which pretty much can do away with a whole bunch of insurance and banking, etc., etc., as far as institutions are concerned, right? So it's a self-contained technology that no longer requires banks to exist. It doesn't require insurance companies to exist. Not really, right? If it were ever fully realized, that is. And this is where this article comes in. It was written May 22, 2021, so a mere few months ago, a couple months ago. It was written by Tiago Ramos Alfaro, and it was published by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg article. And Dave, why did you share this article with us?
Sure. The headline is Musk tweets Musk tweets he supports crypto in battle against fiat currencies. Hear that? The battle against the fiat currencies, Mickey. So Elon Musk is again tweeting about technology and cryptocurrencies, and this time he's clear on where his support is at. In a thread started by Musk himself comparing magic to technology, where someone asked what he thought about people who are angry at you because of crypto, the Tesla Inc. CEO tweeted that the, quoting, true battle is between fiat and crypto. On balance, I support the latter. Bitcoin rose after Musk's post and was trading at around, back then, $38,700 as of 9:32 a.m. New York time. And this was back on May 22nd, 2021. Musk has made similar comments before, including in December when he tweeted that Bitcoin is almost as BS as fiat money. In February, he elaborated to say that when fiat currency has negative real interest, only a fool wouldn't look elsewhere. Former US Treasury Secretary Lawrence H. Summers recently compared crypto to gold as a safe haven asset, but he doesn't expect consumers to turn to Bitcoin for most of their payments, even though it could become an important that's almost a word. Even though it could become an important part of e-commerce. Earlier in the week back then in May, Musk had tweeted that he won't be selling any Dogecoin, and he also posted a cryptic image of a dollar bill with a Shiba Inu dog replacing the face of the former US president. Bitcoin ended the week in volatile territory after a new warning for Chinese officials over cracking down on cryptocurrencies. The earlier sell-off on Friday hit Bitcoin believers still fuming after Musk did an about-face and criticized the token for its energy usage. Yeah, because he claimed that the processing and Bitcoin mining was taking up more power than all of the automobiles, something right on the planet. Crazy, right? He also made a comment later where he said you couldn't purchase a Tesla vehicle using Bitcoin, and it caused quite rather a slump in the price of Bitcoin. So it's there's a little backwards and forwards here. Remember, Meki, when Bitcoin was released and it started becoming popular and the banks took a look into it and then said, no, and they backed away. With the consumers' expectations, they were going to just simply introduce it as another currency that you could purchase using your tap and go. Like you could have an account. But they completely backed away from that, and they've not reapproached Bitcoin or any of the currencies for a connection to be able to spend it. At the moment, it's kind of fantasy where, as far as the banks are concerned.
Yeah, and look, this is the true battle, though. And so we've got the fiat currencies, which are digital, which will become completely digital. Become, we call them credits or whatever. There'll be a name for it. There'll be a global currency as well eventually, but they're battling now with any cryptocurrency. There's Bitcoin, with Ethereum, whatever they're called. There's a whole bunch of them, right? And
Dogecoin, yep.
Dogecoin, yeah, exactly. Right. So there is a lot of contention in this space, and the banks cannot possibly allow an anarchistic currency like Bitcoin to become prevalent in the market, even though some countries have moved to allow Bitcoin as official currency. And
China is certainly in favor of a digital currency.
Yeah, that's correct.
But I think we've already formulated our current currency in Australia to become a fully digital currency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not a cryptocurrency. But a digital-only currency. I think the banks position themselves to be able to cope with that future.
Yeah, and look, it'd actually be a lot easier for the banks to do that, because we would be doing away with a lot of infrastructure and a lot of physical currency, really, right? You will have a card. All your money is going to be on your card, whatever, or maybe anything that can carry a chip. A couple of years ago, we went to a company to look at their tech, and a lot of tech is becoming wearable, clothes. That's right. As well as watches or jewelry or whatever. And in fact, this is a guy we're going to invite to the show as well. A friend of my brother's actually has a chip implanted in him, or maybe a couple now. And another guy in Australia also implanted a chip that he can use now to pay for his train trips, etc., etc. So the technology is there to actually do this all, right? To be very clear, and it'd be a lot easier for companies and banks to interact. In fact, if you put that in connected with what's happening with COVID and the working from home kind of mandate that a lot of companies have, it'll be much easier for everybody just to get rid of office space. Banks don't need office space really anymore much, right? Or certainly no bank space, no retail outlets per se. I mean, there's several banks that I've worked with in the past, the Bank West, for example, here in Australia, that don't really have any physical presence anywhere. There are no shop fronts. It's just all online. And if everybody's working from home, you don't want to leave your house, because there's this fear of getting infected. Then you do it online. Imagine if COVID had hit 20 years ago.
It would have crippled the whole planet.
It would have frozen us in place. We couldn't do. I mean, maybe you and I, we could still have done our job more or less, right? Being in IT, etc. But
20 years ago, yeah, sure, right? Say that would be 2001, and we could have remoted in and done work, but the people we support wouldn't be there.
No, exactly.
And you think about, I remember when rather than being paid digitally, you were being paid in envelopes of money. If you take it back 40 years, it was an envelope with cash.
Yeah. Oh no! Forget 40 years. I was getting paid with an envelope in the late 90s, 99.
Wow.
Yeah. I got my envelope I was paid monthly, right? And go, oh, look at all this money I have, and then next day I had to pay my bill, right? So there was that. In fact, absolutely. There was payroll, etc. And then not only that, back then, let's say 20 years ago, 2000, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. The bandwidth didn't exist.
We couldn't have remoted into anyone, had Teams or anything. Forget it.
Because if everybody was working from home, for argument's sake, then it would be millions of people instead of just a few IT people, and the network would have collapsed completely.
And you couldn't have a second line on your phone.
Correct.
You couldn't party people into the calls.
Now, let's put our conspiracy down for a second, because this is the shiny side out. Okay, we're in the shiny side out here. Okay, now I want you guys to think about this really, really carefully. All of the things that are coming together. In order for us to exist as we do today, I submit to my esteemed colleague and our esteemed listenership, that all of this is part of a grander design. We were ready to be working from home. A lot of us, not everybody, of course, and small businesses suffering, and people that actually have to physically be there, they're suffering as well. But the economy is not freezing. The economy is not collapsing. Because a lot of us in the economy can work remotely. A lot of the work that was done physically by others has been offshored. It's been done remotely anyway, has been automated, has been done away with, right? The sectors suffering the most today are the service industry sectors. That's who's suffering the most, okay? Because, well, if there's no one around, then there's no service to restaurants, tourism, etc., etc. So just think of all the things, and think of the planning it would take to make it all coincide, so that the effect is crippling, yes, on one level, but not crippling to the point where it all grinds to a halt, causing apocalyptic proportions of shutdowns. Okay? So all of this is part of a grand design. All of it. Oh, Mackie's crazy. Look at please call the people with the butterfly nets. No, I'm not. I'm not crazy. I am just looking at the totality of the situation. And because I don't have any other hobbies, I can spend a lot of time doing that. Right? And Dave can agree with me or not. It's entirely up to my esteemed colleague here. But
I'm on board.
It's a grand and in many ways beautiful design. And I quote here, and I say beautiful because when Harry Potter went to buy his wand, he went to see Evander, the wand maker. And he said, oh, this is curious. Your wand is the same one that he whose name we shall not speak has. Like it's his twin.
Yes.
He did great things with this wand. Terrible, but great. And we can expect great things from you as well. But the point he is making is terrible, but great. Yeah. This is beautiful. This is terrible, but beautiful as a design. It's similar to Time magazine put Hitler on its cover.
Yeah.
People go, why'd you do that? Because he was the most influential man that year. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. And only the most influential people. It doesn't matter.
They made the cover.
Bingo. It doesn't matter if what they did was good or bad. Their impact matters. Their impact matters. Do you understand what I'm saying here? And if you look at the design that has been unfolding here more rapidly over the last 5 to 10 years, and certainly massively with increased lightning speed over the last 2 years, the design of it, how it all hangs together and comes together, and this includes everything that has happened in our history. When I say everything, I want to say that probably 95 to 98% of the things that are happening, that we see, are by design.
Mm-hmm.
There are, of course, upsets and hiccups, and I think Bitcoin and blockchain is one of those upsets, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There were a few others along the way, like Kennedy, there was an upset. Lincoln was an upset.
Mm.
And you can pinpoint in history where those upsets happened, and you can also see how it was remedied very quickly, right? You can see the action that was taken to course correct, to get us where we are today. A submissive population, happy to stay in the little pods, happy to have a digital currency, and just be afraid to even leave their house.
Yeah.
That's where we are, everybody.
Yeah,
and this is
not even during the
excellent.
Black Plague, Mickey, where people afraid to leave their house. They just went about business and happenstance occurred to them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we have a government mandate. We have a work from home policy. We've got the tools to be able to do all of this stuff, luckily digitally, and we've got the sneaking suspicion that all of this has fallen into place at the right time.
Yeah, it's by design. Now, there were hiccups along the way, and accelerators. 1012 was an accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The fall of the Berlin Wall was an accelerator. And there were other accelerators. World War II was an accelerator. World War I was an accelerator.
Yeah.
And there were the creation of the State of Israel was an accelerator. Other things that were, that slowed it down, right? The 60s and 70s hippie movement and beatniks. There was a break on the system.
I tried nothing. I'm all out of ideas.
Yeah. Individuals, Noam Chomsky, Timothy Leary, and others you can think of as well.
Yeah.
They were a thorn in the side of the system. The emancipation of the African Americans was a setback.
Could you imagine, Mackie, how smooth the transition would have been from the 50s lifestyle, skipping the 60s and 70s for that matter?
Yeah, because in the 40s and 50s, especially, people were compliant. People believed in the government. Of course they did. They just come out of a terrible war. Eisenhower was in the White House. He was a sensible man. He warns everybody about the industrial military complex, which he was completely right about, by the way. But he saw it coming. But people in the 50s, I want to see even globally.
What was the US announcer, the newscaster through that whole period?
Was it Walter Cronkite?
Yeah, Walter Cronkite was the most trusted voice in America, and perpetuated that trust in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. And no matter how we look, there's no such thing as a golden age in our living memory in the world. There just isn't. There's always been hardship and people having a terrible time and wars and all the wrong things happening. But the transition from the 1950s America into where we are today would have been a lot easier if it hadn't been for the 60s and 70s. Okay, but we are now living proof of what careful planning can do. And don't make no mistake, psychiatry, psychology, all the sciences around that as well, all of that is playing right into it as well. Television, media, social media, reality TV, everything, propaganda, advertising, it's all geared, or has been geared for the longest time, to deliver us to this point. And in fact, other points in the future as well. But to come to this point where you happily stay at home and are afraid...
Without fuss.
Without fuss.
Yep.
And are afraid to leave your home and accept that this is the normal way of living. That is where they wanted us, and that is where they have us. To be clear.
It sure is. I keep thinking, my net streams. Sorry, so that'll do as a description for a streaming service. Net streams. So being able to watch any content anywhere and kind of be happy. Remember, the Romans were all about keeping them fed and entertained.
Bread and games, man. 100%.
That's right. So if we didn't have those services right now, I think we'd all go mad. If we were still relying purely on the radio, I think we might have survived this period, because we're in that trusting period of the media. Right now, we've just gone through the most distrust in the media that we've seen, like, for the prior 4 years to this year, because of the way that leaders had been perpetrated in the media as a narrative. So we're seeing that maybe a comfort level with the media, that they lost so much of their audience to a social media. We're seeing social media change and become this socialist media where the messaging's purely controlled and ideally designed just for you, and the messaging and sentiment analysis on you and psychological profile is derived by what you post, and you're slowly guided by the AI. And Mekhi, they let you keep a little piece they cut out.
Oh, it looks nice on my mantelpiece. I think it does. Yes. But just so, look, this is one of the most important show cycles we've ever done, and we've only ever done it twice. This is the second time. Mm-hmm. And there's the music. Think about it, please. Think about it.
Stay tuned for a Jer Bears After Hours show coming up next. And, do donate to the station. Keep yourself alert and aware is what Shiny Side Out suggests that you do. And we'll catch you next week for another Dave and Mekhi Shiny Side Out. Take care, everyone.